Okay, I want to respect the time of our folks that showed up and are here with us today. So welcome folks for showing up. I'm glad to have you in my computer today. I'm Rhonda Henry. I'm one of the therapists with the Work Life Office, and I'm here today presenting with Cindy Bowling, one of our other therapists. You'll hear more about us and how to reach us at the end as well, but we're glad that you're here with us today. And as I was saying a minute ago, for some folks that may have just been joining us, feel free to put questions in the chat box or comments you might have. We'll do our best to kind of get to those at certain points and leave maybe a little bit of time at the end for some last minute discussion or questions. We're also recording this, so just a thing to keep in mind, the chat box will not be part of the recording. It's just going to be the presentation part of it, but feel free again to put anything in there if you need that for us. Everybody should be on mute at this point, and we're going to go ahead and jump into our program. So let's hit the next slide, Cindy.
1 second.
That's okay. You got a lot of, Cindy's managing a lot of things on her end.
All right.
All right. So let's start out just kind of acknowledging some of the challenges that some of us are dealing with right now. And I know we got a mix of folks. Some folks are working remotely. Some folks are on campus. Some folks have never left campus. And a whole lot of people are doing hybrid versions of schedules these days. And so just knowing on that end of things, what some of those challenges can be. You know, I think it can be hard to feel part of a UK community when we're not there in our typical ways. You know, we're not walking to and from the office. We're not seeing the change in seasons on campus or maybe interacting with students in the way that we used to. We might feel like we've got limited access to some of the benefits. You know, so if you used to work out at one of the gyms on campus, maybe you're not doing that. Some of those kind of things that maybe we can't access as easily as when we were there full time. I think it's really easy right now to feel sort of out of the loop a little bit or kind of forgotten. I don't know about you all, but I feel like there is new stuff coming at me every single day and it's a little overwhelming. And so sometimes it's like I'm getting the information overload, but I can still feel a little bit out of the loop. Also, you know, we are dealing with this kind of additional burden of technology, you know, and again, on one hand, I know I'm super thankful for it. On the other, it's still a learning curve. It's still having to do things in a different way. You know, meeting for a session for us with clients, you know, isn't just walking into the office and sitting down and having that personal connection. It's dealing with the technology and the challenges that come with that. We can also have some concern about going to offices. You know, if you're doing a hybrid schedule, if you're needing to check in, you know, it may feel a little bit uncertain or unsafe, you know, not kind of sure what those protocols are or if everybody's going to be following that. And sometimes I'm hearing from folks that there's some frustration with, you know, who's responsible for what, who's doing office coverage on which days, some of those kinds of things. So there's lots of challenges to be had, that's for sure. Go ahead. Some of the things we may be seeing here with social distancing in particular. We talked about not going into work, some of those kinds of things. But on a personal level, you know, a lot of folks are really struggling right now with continued and ongoing loneliness or worried about loved ones. I know, you know, we see folks in individual sessions for therapy, and I'm hearing from a lot of people worry about the holidays and what that's going to be like, or wintertime when they can't get out in quite the same way. You know, our comfort level with socializing, you know, who's wearing masks, who's not, are we all doing it the same way? This idea of, are we even doing it right? You know, am I doing enough? Is this the right thing to do? All of these different challenges put kind of layers of stress on us, you know, and when we're thinking about our self-care, I think kind of acknowledging some of these big picture sort of shared difficult experiences is important, because we know that in addition to these broad things, we've also got folks who are dealing with their own illness, relative issues, work challenges that are going on. And so the stress coming at us these days can feel pretty never ending right now, I think, and pretty overwhelming. And so I think it's even more important that we really drill into self-care and what that means for us. All right. So when we are looking at things like work-life balance and imbalance and where that shows up, I know I've been hearing from a whole lot of folks that they're finding it harder to keep some of those boundaries in the way that they might have before. And I think for folks who are doing at least some or all of their work remotely from their home, it can sometimes feel less like going to work than it can feel like living at work. That, you know, if my computer's still set up on the kitchen table, could I work a little bit more? Should I respond to that email that I heard kind of ding in the background? it's this feeling of feeling guilty kind of no matter what we're doing, almost feeling like I'm not given enough to fill in the blank. My work, my home, my kids, my partner, my friends, my pets, all this constant sort of marinating in guilt, because we're living in a pandemic. And I say that in a way that kind of sounds flip, but it's a reality that I think we've really got to understand, because it's impacting our ability to manage the stressors that come our way, to access things that are helping us, and to try to find some new things that can actually work. Lots of struggles with inability to concentrate. I think probably top things I'm hearing from people right now are fatigue and inability to concentrate, and then that tie in with guilt or not feeling like you're doing enough. Would you say the same for you, Cindy, in terms of what you're hearing from folks?
Yes, I would say that's true. I think coming into the semester, depending, I think everybody's job looks different than it did back in March. I think things have been ramped up and expectations are kind of like, oh, we're back to business as usual when nothing is as usual. And so
Mhm.
not being able to sustain attention or focus and really worries about what everybody thinks about all that is coming up a lot
Yeah.
for people that I see.
Well, no, I think we've talked about this some before too. The way, everybody's in different, obviously in different departments, and how this is sort of getting handled, communicated, how they're feeling supported might look really different. So some folks, I know a number of people who've started new positions during the pandemic. And so lots of fear of, am I looking like I'm doing enough? Am I connected enough to what's going on in the department? Or is my supervisor going to think that, I'm slacking off because my attention is split and I'm also caring for my child during this? And so I think that balancing work and home just takes on its own sort of special complexity right now, and just even more difficult to kind of keep that balance in mind.
All right. So, in thinking about self care in general, Rhonda had this graphic that she loves. And so, this is kind of how we're going to refer back to this a lot during the rest of the presentation. So, this think to start to think about yourself kind of as a house and with these rooms. So, everyone is a house with 4 rooms: a physical, a mental, an emotional, and a spiritual. Most of us tend to live in one room most of the time, but unless we go into every room every day, even if only to keep it aired, we are not a complete person. So, just to start to think about your life or yourself in terms of having these very distinct parts of you that have needs, because we'll refer back to that and how to tend to those rooms moving forward. So Rhonda talked a little bit about the imbalance of things as it may seem for people. So these are just signs that things might be out of balance for you personally. So you might have difficulty being present. And even though you might be present with people, you may not feel present with people. I think there's a very distinct difference in feeling engaged and just being in the presence of other people. Or if you're alone a lot and trying to be engaged with other people, like noticing that you don't feel engaged or that you feel kind of outside yourself or like the planet isn't real anymore. Might start to notice some irritability, withdrawing from people if that's not typical for you. Talked about this a little bit already, but forgetfulness, feeling scattered in a way that is not typical for you. I call it my brain has turned to oatmeal. Like I cannot access words anymore. Some days are better than others. Also, might notice a lack of enjoyment in things that previously distracted you or gave you comfort or that you enjoyed, and that isn't there for you as much or at all anymore. Might notice some physical symptoms, headache, stomach upset. Notice that, allergies may be kicking your butt a little differently or more intensely this year than they have before, or feeling like you're more susceptible to colds or just feeling poorly, I think more so than we have before. Might be increased conflict with others, whether that is your supervisor, coworkers, people who live in your house with you, friends, all the people might notice that things are just a little more edgy if things are out of balance. Might find yourself falling into kind of numbing or addictive behaviors. And with addiction, I mean alcohol, recreational drugs, but also addictive behaviors, like food, like too many video games, like too many episodes, on Netflix, and getting stuck in negative thoughts or emotions, really having those unwanted or intrusive thoughts in your mind and not being able to find your way out of them, or feeling yourself like just kind of spiraling in there throughout the day. So when we think about the 4 rooms, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, these are just some potential things. It's a very short list, not, something that's going to come up for everybody, but problems that you might have in each of those areas. So that physical are going to be those health issues that might come up for you. And those may be issues like getting a cold, like having a hard time bouncing back from allergies, like medication doesn't work like it used to. It could also be those somatic symptoms that are very real, but are indicative of anxiety or worry or fear or any of those things. The GI issues, stomach issues, headache, those kinds of things. Sometimes that mental room, things will pop up like guilt, either feeling guilty for not doing enough, or feeling torn and feeling like, okay, I'm giving my family or myself what I need, but is work suffering, or I'm giving work everything because I'm afraid not to, and other things are suffering. Or just imposter syndrome showing up and feeling like I'm really incompetent at all the things and I shouldn't even be here. The emotional room, that's the space that those conflicts come up, whether with coworkers or with people in your family or friends. Also, those unwanted thoughts, just anything that pulls at that emotional side of you, and you are just trying to push through, but noticing that those barriers are there, those thoughts are there, it's harder to get along with people, that sort of thing. And the spiritual piece looks very different for other people, but generally I describe it as kind of not feeling a purpose, feeling hope about things, or feeling like a victim. And what I mean by victim is like, nothing is good for me right now, like the universe is against me, like people, those kind of things, getting into thoughts that the world isn't working for you, it's working against you, and it's all personal, that kind of stuff.
Sure. So let's talk about self-care. And I'm going to start with sort of getting us grounded in what I mean by self-care, what Cindy and I mean by self-care with this part, because I think that phrase gets used to kind of as an umbrella term to cover all sorts of things. And so for this discussion, when we're talking self-care, it's really any activity that we're doing to deliberately take care of those mental, emotional, and physical health needs. And it's this idea of sort of balancing the stressors in our life with what kind of self-care we need in that moment. And I think, as we go through and sort of break this down a little bit, a couple of things I would encourage you to kind of keep in mind. And one of those is, what kind of self-care things maybe did you use in the past? And are those working for you now? Do we need to look at maybe adapting some things? So if I'm not able to go to the gym, or I don't feel safe going to the gym, is there some other way to get that kind of component, of my needs met? If I'm needing some social stuff, if I'm needing social time with my friends or my family, and I'm not getting it in quite the same way, is there something I can do to sort of adjust that a little bit? Self-care is different than self-indulgence. Self-indulgence, do not get me wrong, there is a place in this world for some self-indulgence. Get you a pedicure, order the takeout food, do those things that are indulgent, because those are good and those can be enjoyable. But self-care is sometimes challenging ourselves to like step up a little bit to something that we need. One of the examples that I often will use is when I get done with my client sessions of the day, at the end of the day, I've been on Zoom all day long, and I'm usually pretty just mentally tired. And I want to go cruise through my kitchen and grab the bag of chips and go sit on the couch and like zone out. In that moment, though, what I actually need is to get outside for a few minutes, to get away from all screens, because I've been in front of a computer all day long, usually to interact with my pets, maybe just to sit quietly because I've been talking all day. And so sometimes I'll just go sit on my back porch, and I don't want to say anything and I don't want to hear anything, and I just want to be quiet. So when we're thinking self-care, we're trying to balance a little bit. Knowing that when we invest in self-care, it makes us more resilient. It makes us able to meet that adversity just more easily, so it's thinking of it as an investment. It's not this cherry on top, it's the cone underneath. It's the part that's holding us up and sort of keeping us together a little bit. So when we're thinking about developing a self-care plan, and really as we go through this, if there's things that speak to you, start jotting them down or start making a note in your phone, something where you can start developing a plan. And we're going to show some of those a little bit later. But start by thinking back to a time when things did feel more manageable. And again, if there was ever a dividing time in life, this pandemic has certainly drawn a big line of the before times and the current times. But thinking about what things felt different. When things felt more manageable, what was different? What circumstances have changed? Some of those may be things, again, that are out of our control, but some of them may be within our control. Have our needs changed? What can we learn from this? So when we do that reflection, it's not with the intention of kicking our butts about why can't I do this the way I used to do it? No, how do I learn from it? How do I understand myself more and what I need more and how to actually get that need met during this time? So when we're thinking about developing that self-care plan, we want to think about also reframing our thoughts to change perspective. You know, one of those core questions that we come back to, I think we're going to talk about this in a minute, is what can I control and what can I not? But how do we shift our thinking a little bit? Because often that's the part that we're able to control. How am I going to look at this? How am I going to perceive it? And what am I going to say to myself about it? Things like looking at some of those tedious responsibilities as part of a bigger goal. For folks that are having to develop online teaching or develop online programming for your job, some of that learning curve can be really big for some folks. It can be really frustrating to sort of figure some of those things out. How do I get reconnected with, but my purpose in this is this? I want to deliver, for us, I want to deliver content to people in a way that they can receive it. That's really important to me. Sometimes that means I've got to learn more tricks around doing Zoom, or sometimes I'm going to have to, God help me, learn Microsoft Teams, and figure that one out. So even if I don't want to do it, and I'm quite resistant, I'm going to own to the Microsoft Teams wave, I'm going to need to do it because it's going to be part of the bigger purpose of how do I convey my message to folks, or how do I provide service in the best way possible. And if that's one more thing I've got to do, then I've got to shift my thinking about that part a little bit. Asking that question, what can I learn from this, that growth mindset, I find that another just really powerful core question, because if I can shift my thinking and it's not about why can't I do it the way I used to do it, or why does it not work the way it used to work, but if I can go to what can I learn from this, that gives me the start of a plan. That gives me the seed to put on my list of how can I look at this in a different way. And then this piece of what can I control and what can I not?
And something that I just wanted to kind of add that I've been hearing from people is I think with how we're working now, whether you're on campus, whether you're in an office, whether you're still home, whether you're teaching, whether you're, supporting teachers and students, it absolutely looks different now than it used to. And for a lot of us, if not most of us, I think that the joy that we took in our jobs has been taken away. Like that favorite part of connecting with students, that part of sitting in person with people, of having people drop by. And I think that growth mindset piece has been something that I've really been paying attention to, because I feel, this is that victim mindset. Like the universe was like, "Ooh, we're going to show you that you can do this virtually," because I have always been adamantly like, I will never do telehealth. Well, the joke is on me because here I am. So, but it is interesting to me to really dig in and notice who are the people that prefer it. Like, how can I see when people are really avoiding certain things that was very obvious before, but is not so obvious now? And how can I shift the way I do things? So I think that there is something, to stay curious about, just to notice while, seeing that bigger picture and grieving the loss of that you really enjoyed about your job.
Such a good point. I'm glad you jumped in with that one. I totally agree. So when we're looking at these self-care needs, this idea of what we need at different times may look different. What I need today might look different than what I need tomorrow. Most of us are drawn to certain areas, but remember the house and the four rooms. We're wanting to make sure we're hitting these different components of ourselves and our needs. So in different moments, we may need things to help calm us down. If we've been really activated, if we've been, maybe that's, I've been on a phone call with a relative that's just really hard for me. I love them, but it's a hard conversation. And maybe at the end of that, I'm feeling really up in my head and I'm really feeling that stress kind of overtake me. How can I calm down? What are some things I might need in that moment? Feeling overwhelmed, that one often I will hear comes up. Well, I think these days it comes up with everything, but it comes up in work situations. It may come up if you're doing remote learning with a child. If you're trying to figure out your own, how do I adapt my job in this way? And that just feeling overwhelmed. There's so many different things that are sort of pulling at your attention. How can we get grounded? Do we make that list or completing a chore? Discharging energy. Sometimes I know I'll have that, like where I don't want to calm down. I'm all riled up about something and I need to get some energy out. And I don't want to just sit and think. I need to maybe get outdoors and, pull a weed, God help me, or, take the dog for a walk, or, something where I get a chance to put energy out a little bit. And that may help bring my anxiety or my stress level down a little bit. And what times we need connection, and sometimes those don't always show up in a really direct way. It may not be the thought bubbling up of, wow, I need connection today. It might be more things like thoughts about, does anybody even care what I'm doing today? Does anybody even care what's happening in my world today? Well, those kind of negative thoughts that I don't want to stew in might be my signal that, like, I need to connect with some people. I need to see some people in some way, in person or online. And let's move to the next one. So this next one is a little bit of a busy slide, so just bear with me. We're not going to go through all the in a lot of detail. I know, and it was more busy before I calmed some of it down, if you can believe that. And so what I like though for this is it's kind of just a visual little roadmap of, depending on how we feel, what we might need in response to that. And again, it's to me moving away from this idea that self-care means, a bubble bath and reading a book and, getting a day off work. Yeah, those might be what we need, but depending on what's going on and where our head is in these different areas, we may need something else. And so this comes from a book that's referenced at the bottom of the slide. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but if this type of way of thinking about it is appealing to you, if you start thinking, yeah, like maybe this could help me figure out what to actually do for myself, because when I'm overwhelmed or stressed, then I can ask myself these questions, or then I can sort of feed into what's next. The book that this is brought from then kind of goes into what are some different ideas under each of these categories. So again, more thinking about, does this appeal to me? Is this the way I like to conceptualize it? Because I think it's easy to be in the headspace of sort of a one size fits all, when that's really not it's not true for us between different people. Cindy and I have very different self-care needs and preferences, but even for myself, I'm going to fall in different categories at different times, depending on what's going on and what my resources are.
And this is just, I think, a graphic that we have really liked, and I think is a reminder for people. This is COVID specific, but I think can extend to lots of situations. So the outside or in the darkened area are things that you cannot control, and what's in the moon or the light area is things that you can. So with relation to physical distancing or COVID, noticing your own distancing, paying attention to social media or news that you're taking in, finding things to do that are fun or bring you joy, or noticing where your attitude, I don't like that word attitude, but noticing where your mood or whatever. And then the outside is, sometimes we can get in a place of, I'm doing all of this. What are these people doing? Why are people, it's not as much anymore, but hoarding toilet paper at the store? How long will this last? Like, people are tired of being in this mode. And I think that we can really project outward our own frustrations and grief. And so just to come back in and focus in on the things that are in your control, and try to avoid getting caught up in that spider web of blaming other people or paying attention to what other people do, because it'll make you crazy. So moving forward with developing a self-care plan, these are just some things to ask yourself, really breaking it down to the basics. Are your basic needs being met? Are you getting enough food that's good for you, that gives you what you need? Are you getting enough sleep? Do you have enough social outlets? And by social outlets, I mean things that you engage in, either that speak to that creativity piece, people that you engage with, noticing what's important for you and who those people are that you really need to touch base with. Considering what refuels you and how to build more of that into your life. I think it's really important now for us to start really knowing ourselves, what it is that allows us to feel grounded, to feel calm, and knowing there's a difference between self-indulgence and self-care, like Rhonda mentioned before, and how to build those things into our life so that it's a routine and we do our best not to run out of steam. And remembering that with that room metaphor, things are going to go up. Things are going to be high demand. Like work is going to take over your life. And you just have to know that when they go up in one room, it's important that we still tend to all the other rooms, but know that we're not going to be able to spend equal time in there. But going in just to do a little something here or there will help sustain you through those high demand times in other areas. So this is, we're going to talk a little bit about what gets in the way. What are barriers to self-care? I think managing change that has occurred and anticipating more change to come is huge. Right now, we are all in this pandemic. We're experiencing a collective trauma. We are experiencing lots of traumas in the world that are affecting, everybody in a different way. And I just need to validate for people that you are sitting in constant anticipatory anxiety. We do not know what's coming. And so sometimes that can feel like, why should I start something now? Or how can I pay attention to myself when so much is going on and there's so much to take in and acknowledge in the world? Go into that feeling selfish. And sometimes it's just hard to ask other people for help. Other people in your house, in your family, in your community, in your friend circle may not be supportive because those demands are high in certain areas. And so it might feel like it's going to make me feel guilty if I ask for this one thing for myself, since I'm having to spend so much time at work or so much time with the kids or so much time helping to care for, elderly people in my family that shouldn't or can't go out of their home, those kinds of things. Maybe you just don't know how. By the end of this, you'll have a inkling on a place to start that's personal to you. But we can get overwhelmed with where to start, what the options are, what the best place for us to begin is. And our mindset gets in the way and expectations of ourselves. I think we get stuck in the shoulds. We feel like it might be worse for somebody else. Why am I having a hard time? Like, why am I struggling when all people are asking me to do is stay home? Well, when people tell you to stay home, it's really hard to do. Go ahead.
I'm going to jump into it with this idea of that I've sort of seen a lot come up, which is this toxic positivity, this idea that like we've got to think of the best version of everything that's going on, or it's almost like taking gratitude practice, which has a real significant positive impact, but sort of putting that on steroids and then feeling guilty that we can't see the positive in every single thing that's happening. And, I think we've got to be able to acknowledge both. We can hold gratitude and feel absolutely grateful that we've got jobs, that we're not sick, that all kinds of good things are there. But it's okay to acknowledge our struggle. It's okay to acknowledge what's going on or what's weighing on us, because that's part of taking care of it. If we don't ever acknowledge it's even there, or that we're feeling a deficiency in some way, then all we're going to do is sort of we're going to back ourselves in this corner of, I should be happy 24/7 and I should be grateful 24/7. And that's just not reality. And to me, it just sets us up for that fall and for that guilt to really dig in there.
Yeah. All right. So start going through more of starting with the basics and airing every room every day, just to ask yourself, what does my body need? Sometimes, you just need to get out and have a walk. I very much have noticed that I need to be outside more than I ever have. I need to breathe real air. I just need to, for some reason, I was outside a fair amount before, but I spent a lot of time outside this summer. Ask yourself, what stimulates me mentally? What, feeds that part of me that you may or may not get from work? And if you don't get it from work, then how am I getting it otherwise? What connections or relationships do I need, and how are those going? Like, what is really important to you? Who are the people that stick out that you really need to connect with in a meaningful way? And are you able to do those things, or are you getting lost in other things, or trying to connect with everybody? We used to be able to go like have dinner with a group of people, and that knocked those 5, 6 people off the list. And now we're having to check in with those individually. And you might find yourself really missing that person that really grounds you and gets you. So to make sure that you have that connection. And that grounded piece, what makes me feel grounded and connected in the world, whether that's through people, whether that's through spiritual practice, whether that's through literally being grounded and tending to plants and things like that. It's the most important thing is that you find things that work for you and speak to your spirit and body and mind.
And I think if I can add to that, I think that ability to be adaptable, like even when you were mentioning spiritual practice, I was just thinking of how many different folks, who were used to certain routines, whether it was a church or, some type of external thing they would go to, and having to adapt to that, but I think that adaptability of finding what works and also being willing to adapt, something maybe that worked before isn't as effective right now.
Absolutely.
So when we think about this, work and home balance, like I said, the phrase that had hit me a while back was this idea of it's less, working from home than living at work some days. And it's easy for us to get on that slippery slope, that feeling that way. So a couple things just to pull out here, and Cindy, I'm gonna let you jump into some of these too, because I know you've got ideas around some of these as well. But the idea of having a designated workspace, if you are working remotely or doing a hybrid, of some type, I think finding a spot where you can designate as work, because then it's a little bit easier to step away from that. And, if you're in the kind of space where, okay, I've got to work at my kitchen table, that's just all I've got available, and that's where I've got to be, is there some way to still kind of quarter that off when you're done with your day? And so that can be things as simple as closing down the laptop so that I'm not hearing that ding of an email or a message coming through. Is it, putting things, having a file box or having something where you can set things away if you need to do those. Making a schedule. We're going to talk in a minute about some routines and some ways to kind of get a schedule in there. But, even if that's not really been your thing in the before times, being able to have a schedule, having some predictability, having a place where I can park something I need to remember to do, or I can set aside time, whether it's for self-care or some of the other things that I need to get done. It gives us a little bit of order in a time where there's a lot of things that feel out of control and out of order. But being able to have a schedule in some way and playing around with, again, maybe that in the past worked just to keep that on your Outlook calendar, and that was plenty. Maybe now you need something more visual that's beside your computer, or you need something in your phone or something a little bit different. So again, that adaptability. Where and when can I say no to stuff? I realize that some things we can't always say no to, but there's a lot of things that we can. And so really kind of stepping back and giving yourself permission to filter. Am I doing something just because I feel like I should? Does it actually bring value, whether it's to my work or to my home situation? Is it something, and again, there's a tool that we'll go to and talk about in a minute about this a little bit more, but giving yourself permission, I think, is the starting point of really looking at those things and filtering through what doesn't have to be done? What can I say no to? Is this a season in my career or in my life where, yeah, I used to say yes to all sorts of, board and committee involvement. Maybe that's not the season I'm in right now. Maybe that needs to look different because my energy is being taken up in other spaces. Do you want to talk about the transition one, Cindy? I think you've got a nice way of conceptualizing that.
With those transitions, this is something that I have done for a really long time. I think most people have, that conflict between bringing work home or work from home, or having boundaries of when I leave work, can I leave work at work, that sort of thing. For a therapist or a healthcare worker, that is super important. And so I think I have been encouraging people, because if you might be working at home or you might be working a mix where you go into the office sometimes, or sometimes you're at home, to really start to build transitions around the end of work and the start of the rest of my day. So I moved a desk into my living room because it had the best light. And so now I fold up my desk, it's a designated workspace, but I put the computer away in case, I want to do things here. But every day I stand up and I walk outside and I just take a few minutes. Sometimes I'll pull some weeds, sometimes I'll just sit there, sometimes I'll chat with my neighbor. But then I'm very intentional about coming back in my front door, and that's when the rest of my day starts. Work is over, rest of the day has started, and just building in, I call them rituals, but just to transition so that in your mind you have clear definition of the end of one thing and the start of another. And I think it can be really helpful so that we don't feel like it's Groundhog Day and we're just doing the same thing all the time. And if you have kids at home that are doing schoolwork, then they can, practice that too, like to transition, out of, okay, the school day's done. Normally they would go wherever they go after school or get picked up or come home or do this, maybe going outside, maybe taking 20 minutes to run off some energy and then coming in and having a snack. So it feels a little more like something has ended and it's time to move forward with the rest of the day.
Yeah, ditto. Yeah, my routines are different. The things I choose and need at that point are different. But I think the importance of it's not just walking from this desk over to the couch. Like I need, and I realize like I need something for that transition. So thinking about that, and I think we give kids a lot of space for that. We'll say you got 10 more minutes till we're doing this, or, in 5 minutes, you're gonna need to go ahead and get your shoes on, so we give them a chance to think ahead and to make that mental shift. And I think it's just important that we do that for ourselves too, not just between work and home, but between any sort of one part of my day to a different part of my day can be useful.
Right.
Right. All right. So starting with some basics, some more that we will throw in here. Having those routines, we talked about that piece, separating work and home, setting limits where you can. And again, I realize that sometimes, if a big grant is due the next day, yeah, I may be working later tonight or doing more tonight, but where can we find some balance and where can we set some limits? Again, just because we've always done something a certain way doesn't mean we have to continue. Email is probably the one that I feel like comes up the most because it's so easily intrusive in our lives. And so even things like, okay, when I'm done with my day, do I have to respond to things after hours? If not, then truly setting that boundary and holding it. The lies we tell ourselves, you all, like I'm right there in the mix with you. I'll get further ahead. This will keep me from having to do it in the morning. I'll go on and knock out these 2 or 3 emails so I don't have to do whatever. Y'all, they're lies. Like it does not get us further ahead. It just lets work spread into our world like kudzu, and it just ends up being everywhere and you can't get rid of it. And so knowing, for example, if you deal with students, you don't need to, if it's not an emergency situation, you don't need to respond to that email in the evenings or on the weekends. That's part of what we're also teaching students about as part of a university experience is professionals have a home life. Professionals mean you work in this time and you're away during this time. It also lets them filter and solve problems for themselves, and you don't have to be on 24/7. So thinking about those places where you can set some limits, where there is some potential, and even if it's not going from one far end of a continuum to the other, can I do less of something? Can I do it a little bit differently? Maybe I take the notifications off my email thing on the phone so I'm not seeing that little red number pop up, those kind of things, small adjustments. I think limiting work talk, that's one. I take the big sigh because I recognize myself in that one. I think for those of us who are interested in the things we do for work, it's really easy to want to talk about it a whole lot. But most of the time, we don't need to just sit and marinate in it. Yeah, I want to tell my partner how my day was. I want to hear what their day was like. But do we need to sit and talk about that for our whole night? No. Can we keep that to a shorter 5-10 minute check-in? So yeah, we get to share that and we get to have that connection, but we're not letting it, again, it's not the kudzu that's spreading over our whole day. Blocking time to be able to focus on one thing at a time. I think one of the biggest sort of lies we are sold is this idea of multitasking and that we can keep, 10 balls in the air at once and do them all great. And it is a path to guilt and to self-doubt and to that imposter syndrome. That's what leads us there. And giving ourselves permission just to focus on one thing. Like I love sometimes just getting to focus on making my PowerPoint look a certain way or getting to focus on just being with my pet. And I'm not trying to fix 5 different problems at once. I'm just letting myself be present in that moment. I mean, it's the core of mindfulness. Setting boundaries. Again, where can you realistically say no? That theme will come up a lot. Where can we say no and how do we do that?
And if you have a hard time, like I have a hard time with this, like saying no to people, feeling like if somebody's reaching out to me, like they may need to have that conversation. But last night I noticed that I was starting to get frustrated and it was, too much work stuff, too much, political stuff, too much this, too much that. And somebody texted me and within like 10 minutes of asking me a question. And I responded back, I'm doing too many things right now. I'll get to it when I can. And normally that would, well, a few years ago, that would have made me nervous. Now it doesn't so much, but really looking into if it's, if you have a hard time saying no, or you get anxious when you're away from the computer too long, or you're not looking at the email, just something to be curious about.
Let me throw that really sparked for me. One of the things that I've loved that Brene Brown has said, and I love some Brene Brown in so many ways, but one of the real simple ones that she said that helps me a lot is this idea that every time I say yes to one thing, I'm saying no to something else. And like when I first heard that, I wanted to be like, nah, that's not true. No, that's not true for me. I'm going to say yes to all the things. No, when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. The no that you're saying isn't necessarily saying no to another productive activity. It's not saying I can't do A because B is keeping me so busy. It might be that what I don't want to say no to is I need some downtime. I need to sit with my partner and watch a stupid TV show. What I'm saying no to, am I shortchanging myself in that effort to say yes to other people or that feeling that I need to say yes to other people? And like, I get to count too. If I'm shortchanging myself and my own needs, then if I'm saying yes to something, I'm saying no to something else that I might actually need. That one just always sticks with me.
This is another graphic I think that resonated with us early in our current situation. But I think are good questions to ask yourself any and all of the time, to look at what am I grateful for today? And again, acknowledging what Rhonda said earlier, that doesn't mean that you can't move out of if you're struggling or you're feeling sad or you're feeling alone. Like you can hold gratitude and hold whatever feeling is in yourself at that moment at the same time. Who am I checking in on or connecting with today? What expectations of normal am I letting go of today? Am I getting outside today? How am I moving my body? And what beauty am I either creating, cultivating, or inviting in today? I think if we looked at those 6 things in a very simplistic, it doesn't even have to be like a thing that we do. It could be rolling the garbage out last night. The sunset was really pretty. And I like took that in along with taking my garbage out and it's fine. It doesn't have to take up a whole lot of time.
And for me, I like just how casual essentially this one is, where again, I'm not pinned into one thing, but I'm kind of going back to what are my values? What's important to me? What in those 4 rooms do I need to make sure that I'm sort of touching base in? And so again, if there's things that have sort of come out of this or that you're hearing, you're like, oh yeah, I could 2 or 3 of these really strike me. Put it on a Post-it note. That's a starting place. That's the start of a self-care plan.
So speaking of the start of a self-care plan, where to begin? Really just starts with a commitment to yourself to notice that something is a little off. You don't have to notice that all the things are off. You can start with one thing or you can start with all the things, whatever works for you. But to make a commitment to yourself to look into what works for you, what you can do differently. Consider what has worked in the past and how to adapt that. If something worked for you, like going to the gym or going on a run with friends, but you don't feel comfortable doing that, or you can't go to the gym or whatever that is, how can I adapt that so that I get the end result with a different beginning and some just thought and consideration of what might work. Begin with realistic goals. Try not to get caught up in the shoulds. We could be there all day with what we should do or should not do. Notice when you have that judgment for yourself and try and peel that out. Consider an accountability partner, somebody to check in with, someone who has similar struggles, or that you just ask somebody like, did you get outside today? What did you do to move your body? Like, and have an agreement that if you haven't done that, then you'll hold each other accountable and do that. If something doesn't work for you, it just doesn't work. It doesn't mean you failed. It means it doesn't resonate with you in a way that is meaningful, so you can try something else. And most importantly, don't give up. It's too important for your well-being, your health, your physical health, your mental health, being able to engage and be the best you.
Well, and can I, just a couple of thoughts that came up for me as we were going through that, even if it's things that you still have access to, it just may not bring you the joy or the distraction that it used to, so one I hear a whole lot from folks these days is struggling to concentrate on reading, and finding themselves reading the same page over and over, that sort of thing. So maybe you try audiobooks, or maybe you try reading short stories or articles or things that are different. So again, that adaptation may not be that you just can't even get to it, but it just may not feel like I can use it the way that I used to use it. And giving ourselves permission to sort of explore other ways of doing it.
And I will say, I have never been an audiobook person, or so I thought, but I have tried that like during this time to just have things on in the background. I bought a Bluetooth speaker, changed my life. I don't know where I've been, but and I've just really been listening to fun things that I don't really have to pay attention to, but sometimes I'll go back and be like, oh, was that, what was that? And it feels productive. Like, it's not sitting down and reading a book because I don't have the brain power to do it, but I'm listening to things that are light. And someone in the chat mentioned that list of quarantine questions that they've really started asking themselves what they need, like having that internal dialogue. Absolutely. Like, if you are feeling some type of way and you don't know why, just ask yourself, because if you're quiet for a minute, the answer will come.
I'll come to this one in a second, but I want to mention another one. I got a private message through the chat box also that somebody is using Body Groove by Misty Tripoli. I'm really glad to hear that because it is showing up in my Facebook feed constantly. So I'm glad to hear somebody likes that because it looks really fun. And it's more than exercise, it's acceptance, dance, and emotional support. Great program. Feel free, if there's something you've come across while we're doing these last few slides, these last few minutes, if there's something that's working for you, throw it in the chat box, because this is a place where it is helpful for folks to know what's out there or what might be a good resource for me. All right, so this is one kind of option for a plan or a structure if you're needing that. So, we talked about having something that's sort of written or having something that you can see can sometimes be helpful. This is a lot of detail. I'll say for me, it's a little too much detail, but I know for other people, it like really strikes them like, oh yes, I love this sort of one page. I can see my day at a glance. So thinking about, and there's a million of these out there, like all different sorts of plans, or you can draw up your own, which you'll see in a minute. But if it's something that like this helps you stay focused, it kind of gives you something to be able to hone in on and not lose track of. It keeps us from having to just keep all of it in our brain. I've written it on the sheet. I know what the plan is for today, or there's 2 or 3 people in the house and they see what the plan is for us today. Using a tool that works for you. There's so many of these that exist. And this is just one example of one.
And I really like this one, and Rhonda thinks I'm crazy. I actually printed it off. I hate toggling back and forth between my email and my calendar. Like, I want them to be 2 different things. I want to look at both of them at the same time. So I think it's helpful for me to just see big visuals of like, I only have an hour between that, only have 20 minutes between that. I have 3 hours here, which is unprecedented, but, and I will often, just about every day, have a client quote of the day, and I like to write that down. Either it was inspirational or just super funny. People say some funny things.
That is very true. Hold on a second. My little boxes are blocking my view there. So this is one, we love some stuff that we can find on the internet, as you can tell from our different memes that we pull and images. So this is one that I came across. And again, I like that it's a little more casual, so it kind of gives you themes or areas that somebody maybe is wanting to work on, but it's not saying it's got to be done at this exact time or in this exact way. Again, this may or may not be the mix of things that will be interesting for you. But I really like the top thing, that those kind of 3 starter ones, the shower, medication, and water. I talk with clients a lot about this, like, what's your basic 3? What's 3 things that just, okay, I may be having a really rough day and I might not get a whole lot of anything done that I hoped I would get done, but what's going to help me at least feel a little more human, a little more grounded, be able to take care of myself and take that breath. It might be for you stepping outside for a few minutes. Again, staying on top of, getting dressed out of one set of clothes into another. I feel like I only wear comfortable clothes at this point. So I'm just kind of going from one comfy set to another comfy set, but like putting on fresh clothes, doing something like that that feels a little different. Again, categories, if the 4 rooms kind of framework works for you, okay, what's some things in those different areas where you can touch on? If something like this makes sense to you, works for your brain, listen into your gut. Are you drawn to a list like this? Are you drawn to that Post-it note we showed, or the one we showed a second ago, the more kind of structured list? The tool we use, I think, is less important than finding one that makes sense to us, that it will, again, spark an idea or spark a memory of, yeah, this is something I'm wanting to do or something I'm wanting to remember.
Oh, so someone is asking, what is an example of a spiritual practice? And Rhonda, what is the app that you mentioned in your private chat?
Okay. The app, was that from the private chat message? That was the Body Groove program. So Body Groove by Misty Tripoli was the name of it. And I'm going to copy that over and put it in the chat, and just not the whole message, but just that part of it. Speaking of apps, I can't remember if there was another app that I mentioned, and if there was, I apologize. But there are, Lord, there's a blue million apps out there to help with goal setting, tracking, even within spiritual practice. There's everything from like those daily bread, sort of liturgy things, but that can also be things like mindfulness practice, having some meditative time in the morning to read or to write or to journal, those kind of things. And for anybody who's interested in, oh, whoops, sorry. I'll put that in this chat box in just a second. For anybody who's interested in any of these details, feel free to drop us an email after this. The presentation itself is recorded and it's going to be on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to access that. But we're happy to share a PDF of the presentation as well if you're interested in some of these tools. Feel free, if you want to put your information in the chat box, we can send it to you, or you can reach out to us afterwards, either one. This is another tool that I like a lot, and it's this not to-do list. So the way that I use this with folks is, if you look at sort of what all's on my plate, the big to-do, how do I filter it through these 4 blocks on the right? So some of those things that are on my plate are some of those other people's responsibilities. Am I doing things just because I've either always done them, or I don't know if somebody else can handle it? And do I need to let somebody else be responsible for taking care of their stuff? Things that are out of my control. So am I trying to figure out the solution to something that either I don't have the information to solve, or it's not my responsibility to do it? I can't control what the outcome is, and I'm just kind of sitting in worry and rumination about it. But actually, I can just sort of set it over to the side. That's out of my control. When I know more, I'll deal with it. Or if something changes, I'll step up to my part of it. The stuff that drains me, I wish I could say those are all things that you can just throw out the window. But since we can't do that, I like to think of those in terms of what things might need some extra self-care around them. And one of the ones I go to is, God love them, I love my family, but there's a couple of family members that are really draining for me to interact with. And so I still want to talk to them. I still want to have a relationship with them. But I know that if I'm going to be on a Zoom call or a phone call, or if I were to see somebody in person, I might need to kind of bookend that with some different self-care. Before I go, I might need to have a quiet morning before I make that call. or after I'm done with the call, I may need to be able to debrief that with my mom or with somebody else who kind of gets what the dynamic is there. So if it's something that's a draining thing, that doesn't carry equal weight with maybe everything else that's on my list, and so I don't want to sort of set myself up to assume that, like, oh, I can just knock that out. No, it's a 15-minute phone call, but it's going to take me another half hour to kind of get my feet back under me. And then some stuff that just doesn't need to get done. And quite honestly, we've all got some elements of that. And it's okay, to make that decision and be purposeful. And yeah, I used to do that, but I'm not going to take time to do that at this point.
So final reminders, just remember that circumstances, needs, and priorities will change with home and work. When things get off track, I think talked a little bit about it before, they will absolutely get off track. Just give your compassion to yourself, refocus, shift to something else to see if that will work. And all of this is a process or a practice. It's not a task that we're ever finished with or complete. So it's a practice. We're just moving through it. We're always going to be building better selves. So
absolutely. So I adjusted a couple of these and made note. So this is our Real Talk series. So there's, how many of us? 4 of us therapists and our work life specialists. Sorry, I just had a moment where I couldn't remember apparently where I work. So there's 4 therapists, a work life specialist or an elder care specialist who comes together for Real Talk. Real Talk is just a discussion time where we kind of talk on different topics and take questions from folks. So it's not a presentation so much, it's just different views around these different topics. The first 3 that we did are available online on our YouTube channel, which you'll see on the next slide. And so those are there. Feel free to check those out if those are of interest to you. And then we have another one coming up in November and December. In November, we will be talking about depression. And in December, we're going to be talking about sleep difficulty, because those are things we tried to pull these topics from some of the surveys that were done by Staff Senate, and then getting kind of feedback from employees about what the struggle is right now that they're dealing with. So these topics came from you guys and sort of what the interest was. And we're hoping to continue those on in the new year, but this is at least what we've got planned out at this point.
This is us. This is the Work Plus Life Connections team. That's Ann Bissoni, Eric Wilkinson, myself, and Rhonda. We offer 5 free therapy sessions for every UK employee. All those services are confidential and not attached in any way to your employment record. We're only doing telehealth right now. This is for employees, sponsor dependents, retirees. We do offer presentations like this to groups or at events, that sort of thing. And that is our website and YouTube channel. We also, Rhonda and Ann Bissoni, do Midday Mingle, and that happens a couple times a week where people just come together to talk about what's going on. I hear that they talk about food every time.
Lord, we talk a lot about food. We have a lot of food recommendations. I'll tell you, it is probably where I laugh the most throughout my week. We're doing those on Mondays. Actually, there's one going on right now. Mondays and Thursdays from 12 to 1. Super casual, eat your lunch during it, just truly, it's just kind of a hangout time to sort of check in with folks. Because I think Cindy mentioned this earlier. A lot of us are missing the in-between times, the stuff where we're just hanging out in somebody's door and how was your weekend and what's going on and how's your house renovation going? I mean, just that stuff that we're yearning for in a lot of ways. So that's a place to do that if that's of interest to you. I'm put a note in the chat box, but if you'd like a PDF or a copy of the PDF of the PowerPoint, put your email address in the chat box and we're more than happy to send that. And a lot of those other kind of files and planning things that we showed, I'll send those as well. So feel free, you can print them out, you can go back and review this stuff. And a lot of folks are talking to us about these very things that we presented on today. Certainly we've got folks who are coming in with maybe a mental health diagnosis, or they're trying to figure out a bigger thing going on. We've got some folks who are just trying to figure out, again, okay, I used to be okay and kind of have my feet under me in this way. How do I kind of develop a plan for myself? Or how do I figure out what's getting off track for me or how I can work with that? This is also Wellbeing Week. So there's a whole lot of things going on. And some of you all may have seen the link for this through the Wellbeing advertising. There's other things that are still going on today and tomorrow. And so feel free to check that out if you're interested in that. Any other last minute questions, comments, thoughts?
I did want to come back. Someone did put a question about, like, what are examples of spiritual practice, how to address those things. And I think that that is very personal for everybody. I think, you know, it can look like attending church, whether that's in person or online. It can look like I drum like a West African drum, like that is very much part of keeping me grounded. I will do that. I think that for some people, it's just what gives you purpose and what fuels you to feel connected to other people or purposeful in the world. You know, some people that comes through service for them. And so volunteering in whatever, you know, way that feels meaningful for folks, that kind of thing. So I think to really just touch in with yourself on what makes you feel purposeful, what makes you feel filled, you know, and that is spiritual. I don't think it has to look like any prescribed thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing from a lot of folks that I think just because of the challenging world time that we're in, I mean, not just the pandemic, but racial justice issues, interpersonal issues, political stuff going on. I'm hearing from a lot of folks who are really either wanting to reconnect with meaning or finding that they're needing more of that in their life. You know, and so that's a good place to can tap into other friends, have those discussions, you know, talk to somebody like us to sort of build some new practice maybe that's in place. Because I think a lot of us are struggling and sort of needing that component to get addressed maybe in a different way. All right.
All right.
So I'm
Well,
seeing
we
lots of comments.
appreciate it.
Thank you all
Oh,
for being here. Sorry, I'm talking over you, Cindy. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I appreciate everybody that took time out of their day to come and hear this stuff. I hope that there was a nugget or more in there that was helpful for you. We're here anytime you need us, and we're happy to, you know, help you, department, that sort of thing. We're here.
I have one last thing. I've gotten a couple of a private message or two that have popped up. Somebody saying they were interrupted or they didn't get to see everything. So just a reminder, this will be on our YouTube channel. And if you put your email in the chat box, we're more than happy to send this to you. Or if there's anything in particular you need to explore, or want more information on, feel free to message one of us. We're happy to check in with you. We're both just in the UK system with our names as our emails, just like everybody else.
Here we
So
are.
you can find us there. All right. Thanks for all the kind words. I appreciate all the thank yous you guys are throwing out. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, we won't be presenting this one again, but it is going to be available. But we do have lots of other things that we've got on tap. So check out the website and you'll find us here in your computer.
Everybody take care.